on this cold, windy Wausau evening. Kind of an unexpected dip, but we're Wisconsinites. So Jennifer and I met before COVID hit, and this has been a long time coming. You know, we were just talking about it over lunch today. That where did 5 years go? It's quite amazing. In her spare time, well, there really isn't any such thing as spare time. She's been building this body of work that it's being seen right here, right now, for the first time. And I'm so grateful that you agreed to do this and that you're here. These paintings are incredibly playful, and that's something that my students know when I say play more. That's what I've been trying to instill in all of you is play more, think less, and be bold, and don't be afraid to try new things. Jennifer is known around the world as basically a color scientist. You are absolutely brilliant. She has her own atelier academy in Austin, Texas, where she teaches painting, drawing, and if I were younger, I'd be right there. So anyway, I don't have too much to say because I'm just blown away that this shows up, and it's almost like the work was created for this space, the way it all worked out, which I don't think is a weird thing, because too many weird things are happening these days for any of it to be coincidence. So without further ado, Jennifer Balkan from Austin, Texas.
I'm really happy to be here. As David said, we met in 2019. He invited me here to teach a painting workshop, and it was down in the basement. And it's just beautiful how far this place has come. And it's super great. Yeah, this work is it's a very interesting, different kind of series and body of work for me, because I started some of it before the pandemic, and not that I had been it wasn't like I started that and I've been working on some paintings for years now. It was that I abruptly stopped. So like everybody in this room, I'm sure, when March 2020 happened, life as we know it abruptly changed, and whatever you were doing at the time, changed forever. And so I had started actually the three large paintings with the dogs. I had this now, in retrospect, a really crazy vision at the time that I was going to do 12 paintings, and I think I came up with the number 12 because I was thinking of a year of paintings. But they were inspired by the loss of my best buddy, my dog Archie, in 2019. And so I had started these paintings thinking about our human connection, our historically incredible rich connection with dogs, and started them. And then when the pandemic happened, I just couldn't paint. I stopped. It all felt very, unimportant, I guess. It's not pressing. And I have a teenager who was almost 10, I guess, at the time. I was so super depressed. I just kept thinking about him and how, I don't know, I was really scared that it almost sounds kind of silly now, but that the world was going to end. in some way. I mean, maybe not like really end, but end as I knew it to that point. And it wasn't about me, but it was about my son, and how I'm like, well, you know, I feel I've had a good life in the way that my life has gone this far, and he's not even 10 years old, and I have no idea what it's going to look like at this point. And so I couldn't paint, I was in this pretty dark place. I have a school that I co-own with a couple of artists in Austin, and I was literally in the middle of teaching this one class that I've started. I typically had been teaching portraiture as well as figurative painting. I had just started a still life class, which I hadn't done in a while, so it was sort of a fun newish thing. And we had met maybe twice, and then boom, everything stopped. And so my colleagues and I were kind of quickly strategize on like, what do we do with our school, with our classes, and like a gazillion people around the planet at this point, you know, like, oh, maybe we'll teach online, you know, and so that became a thing, something that I never thought I'd be okay with doing in art. Yeah, basically it wasn't painting a canvas, but it was, I felt like, well, at least teaching others art education felt like a worthy thing, to, you know, something that was worth something more than just me feeling, I don't know, just me and my ego and my paintings. I just was like, all right, well, I teach art. So that got me back into the flow of painting again. And so then I guess like within a couple of months, I was like, all right, back in it. But I still couldn't, I couldn't continue the paintings that I had stopped in March. And then all these other, you know, so many things were happening in the world and in our country. And I actually, I had a show coming up more or sooner at the time, and all the dates changed, of course, then this show, and so I was thinking about work for that show, and I basically started a whole new everything at that moment. I shelved these other works and started afresh on something that I felt was kind of prescient at that moment. And so I started exploring, well, a few things. For one thing, I picked up a couple new mediums, which I didn't really expect or anticipate doing. I've been oil painting for quite a while now, and loved it, and wasn't necessarily like tired of it. But what happened was with this remote, these remote classes and remote life that was going on in seclusion. I was, at our school, we host what we call open studio sessions, where a life model comes in and people, in an unstructured way, not really a class, but they'll bring in their materials and draw, paint, whatever, from a model. And so we decided to do that in a remote way, in which we would have a model, basically create a recording of a model. It sounds kind of funny. We felt like there was like a little more, I don't know, sitting of it than just a still photo. So we would record a person posing for a little while and then loop it. So it was a kind of a funny thing. But the silver lining of all that was that we were hosting these remote open studio sessions, and people from all around the planet were tuning in. So suddenly it was beyond Austin artists, but we had artists in Europe and Asia who would tune in whatever time it was for them and sit and draw or paint the model on the screen. And whoever was hosting that, whether it was me or one of my colleagues, would just basically like navigate the Zoom screen, let people in. And the neat thing about it was we would share our work on the screen, and it felt nice to be able to commune with humans during that really weird time. And so so I had gotten my kid a set of paint pens just for fun, for art. You know, these Posca paint pens, which are acrylic. If anyone, I see some nodding. Okay. So essentially, they look like magic markers, but they're actual acrylic paint. They're acrylic paint that come in a marker kind of format. And so at the time, while I was hosting these sessions, I always loved to paint. I also like to draw. I love color. So I decided, maybe I'll try something with these pens and see what happens. And so I started doing that, and I took to them. I really, really liked them a lot. It was like this really interesting way. It was a challenge to try to create something realistic, realism with a limited number of colors and mix, so to speak, on the paper and sort of create the illusion of reality. And so it was this interesting optical mixing puzzle that I found challenging and fun. So that's where they began, and so they came out of the pandemic. And then once I got really into them, people were noticing them, and then I started doing little commissions of portraits of people using the Posca pens as a drawing medium. And so got way into that, and then decided to try my hand with Bic pens, like the little old school clicky Bic 4-color pens, and there's a whole world of realism with Bic pens, which I discovered while I was getting into that too. So so doing that and painting, doing this, doing that, and then at some point I started imagining how can I merge these different styles and mediums. So obviously the Posca pens are super, super saturated in color, highly, highly chromatic. Anyway, I was just sort of playing with the idea of figuring out how to merge them. I had already done a body of work for this other show. I called it Pandemonium in 21, and that was the beginning of my play with real graphic elements, kind of 2D-ish comic book, retro comic thought bubbles, and very thinking a lot about Roy Lichtenstein and some of that pop commercial art in the 60s. And with voluptuous looking, figurative, a little more, more realistic, 3D-esque figures. So enjoying that interesting juxtaposition of the two things. So I had done that, and so now beyond that, trying to figure out, okay, I don't feel like I'm done with this thought bubble kind of world of this pop graphic element. So thinking of that and rich color and just all this, how do I merge my latest obsession with these pens, and so I played around with that a little while before I really got to an effect and that I liked, that I thought worked. And so when I finally landed on that, I started thinking about, I had this vision of people, subjects, sort of communicating from wall to wall, literally. So I had thought, I love painting people. I've painted kind of like diptychs of the same person before, and thinking about the way we, ourselves psychologically, we have conversations with ourselves, psychologically, literally. And so I had these visions of the same person looking in the mirror and thinking and struggling and what that would look like. And then I also thought, okay, yes, I'm going to have a version of them described in these Posca pens and a version in oil paint, and it'll be like up to the viewer to assess which one is more real. And so all these these thoughts going on, and thinking about trying to figure out with such a saturated color palette of the acrylic pens, what would work with that. And so I decided to reduce the palette on, if I'm going to play with that saturated color, I would need to limit the other color in the picture. So this is a lot of technical stuff. I don't know if I'm boring everybody, but I was like,
not at all.
You're going off on my what was she thinking? Okay, anyway, so that is where these paintings came from, essentially. And so, and I always envisioned them like on walls talking to each other, which is very exciting to see that actually happening. And I was, I would, the gray, at first I thought, okay, they're going to be gray. They're all going to be gray. And they're going to be like richly chromatic in the heads and faces. And then after doing the gray ones, I was like, no, they can't all be gray. So it was fun, just like figuring out what palette is going to work for these couple and these three. And so working on all those. Then it was like, I don't know, just suddenly came to me that I needed to finish the dog paintings. And I think sometimes, out of sight, out of mind, that I literally, when I say shelved them, they're kind of big, but they were just behind stuff in my studio. And then at some point, as I was kind of rifling through things, I'm like, the dog paintings, my effort. And I had to kind of looked at them since then, and just didn't really, I don't know, just didn't really feel like I was ready for them. But at some moment, I became ready to work on the dog paintings again. And so, but it's very weird too. I don't, for those of you who are painters, artists, or even not just artists. I've talked to my sister about this actually, and she's an English professor and a writer, and talking about leaving a project and coming back to it. I mean, really anything, it doesn't have to be art, but you're different, time goes by, you're different, your experiences are different. And if it's in if it's in something that you've been working on for a while, sometimes you feel like, well, I'm better now. I'm stronger in whatever that discipline or that creative outlet or that art form is. And so it's a weird thing to revisit your older self, and you're very critical. It's So I was fixing a lot of things that I thought weren't, I don't know, they weren't to my liking. And so I had to fix and go back and kind of decide, figure out what I was thinking then and what am I thinking now. And so it was very, very challenging, revisiting the paintings, but also very excited. I felt really euphoric, I'm now finally ready to finish them. So, and then incorporate them with everything else. The chroma of it all, I thought really, really, the then and now kind of wove very well into one another. And I typically work on a few works at a time. I actually have a limit. No more than 3. It's usually 2 to 3. Beyond 3, you're a mess. You're just too scattered. But I like to work on at least 2, because that way, if I'm working on something and when I get to a problem in their area, or just I get a little stuck, I put it aside, work on the other, and then I can be objective again. Just several days later, come back to that original piece, and everything, it's easier to figure out stuff. So anyway, so I've just kind of been in this mode of pulling things together. When David initially asked me, how many pieces, like, what do you think you're gonna do for the show? It's like, I don't know. I'll figure it out, you know, and somehow, I guess I did. Yeah, it feels really good to, so it's been a process. This particular process has been super experimental. My work in general has gotten, as far as my process, I should say, I used to be very, very planned. Like here's the narrative. I'm going to describe this visually across a storyboard of 5 panels or something. It was all very laid out. Like I could, you know, just like the drawings, everything was very just planned. And I got bored. I just got a little bored doing that. And it was, I don't know, there was like no, I mean, then there's always surprises, but I got to a point where I just wanted to be more experimental in general with like, okay, I'm going to start this. I'm going with a little bit of a plan, and I'm going to see where the painting takes me. And so this was very much like figuring out where the painting is taking me. Oh, I forgot to mention, I was using spray paint too. You can see sprayed stencil, playing with stencils and kind of like in my house. My house has a lot of wall stencil, and I've sort of just kind of love this pattern, merging pattern and color, and so there's a lot of like technical fun and experimentation that was happening while trying to also create a message. So anyway. That was a long explanation to it all, so you're welcome to inquire, questions, comments. Thank you all.
So when you're setting up for an idea, what dictates the idea of something becoming a diptych or a triptych, and how do those things work together? How does a triptych work?
It's a good question. I knew I was doing pairs, and I didn't know that I was doing triplets or triptychs until I was working with a model, or working with different models or myself, and I had this the model in the chartreuse paintings in the front. I had a few different ideas with her, and I think like I already thought that, okay, her name is Winter, and like, okay, I have a few different ideas of what I want to sort of express with her, and I'm going to try to create that in our reference material, in our photo sessions, and see what happens, basically. And so I think I did go into that thinking, like, I'm imagining 3, and I can't really tell you like why, but it's just I'm imagining 3. Or, you know, I had done these sets of 2, and then I wanted to go into 3 different versions and variations of her thinking with herself. So.
Has what you're doing here changed how you teach?
Oh, the work in the paintings? You know, I think like it's so interesting, the relationship between teaching and your personal work. The way I've been teaching in the last couple of years is very academic, meaning like, you know, very, very classical representational method to draw. and also to paint. And so you know, my personal, I love using color very, very chromatically, but when I teach it, I have to really mute it, and kind of enable people to find the color, you know, or sort of create something that's more, quote, natural, more realistic. And then, like, once they get a handle on that, then we can play around a little more. So, it's interesting because I'm like much more, I guess, a lot like much less experimental when it comes to teaching. So that answers your question. Yeah.
So the models and the pictures, I was reading something you wrote about the bubbles that are above them.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us about, I mean, did you hear a story that they had? I mean, what prompted you to put those particular bubbles above them? Like if I look at a rigid, like the one behind you over there, like clearly to me, the one on the left looks more distressed. You know, she's looking distressed to me. The one on the right is, well, in my opinion, what she's saying is, I'm fine, I don't give a shit. You know, I'm happy. You know, I don't know if you've heard, were there stories like that? I mean, what were you?
They're very, like, they're truly somewhat open. Like
Yeah.
that's probably a very unsatisfactory answer.
No, I just wondered.
But you know, often, as you can see of like the actual shapes of the thought bubbles across the works, they're all very different.
Yes.
And I had a lot of fun, like kind of very decidedly creating the thought bubbles themselves and what, you know, like what shape and whether, you know, something is a little curvier or more jagged looking, which is connotes certain kinds of emotion. You know, it has. I mean, clearly, like in comic book work, it's very, you know, it's very, very intentional. And so I very much wanted the 2 or 3 paintings within the set to be different.
Yeah.
Like have a different kind of feeling and emotion. You know, much like we have that, you know, in ourselves. It's sort of like this, like, you know, maybe a little of antagonism as well as agreement, or but yeah, for them to feel different and to have a different kind of energy.
Because I honestly could look at that in the morning and have a very completely different view at night.
Well, I love that.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah.
That is what I mean, and also, you know, it's really it's about you, not the painting.
Right.
It's like what you bring into it based on your life, your experiences, your thoughts for the day, or whatever. So I think like that's the beauty of visual art. That's why, you know, as much as you know, we all yearn for the artist state. You know, what was the artist thinking? But the truth is, like, I don't know. I mean, I told you guys a lot tonight, but I often don't even like to talk that much about a painting because I feel like it's limiting. And whatever the artist intended is only a piece of the story, you know. So
Thank you.
yeah, sure.
That's really
Yeah.
cool.
I have a question for you. Do you hear voices?
All the time.
He's always the left.
Yeah.
Never the right.
Never the right. Maybe tomorrow.
Maybe tomorrow. One day at a time.
Yeah. Thanks.
I have a question.
Yeah.
The pink self-portrait,
Mhm.
you have the 2 hands and then the extra arm. Just
Like, what is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that one was the first one of this, you know, these particular ones that I did. Like, that was actually the beginning, and I had a couple of other pieces that are not in here that I excuse me, that I worked on, I don't know, just like they kind of, they didn't make it, that had more arms. And so I, on a technical aspect, I was really excited for neon pink because it's really hard. Well, for one thing, I realized that, there's no oil paint. That's the only painting that's 100% acrylic in the room. And it's really interesting. It's pretty much impossible to create even the illusion of neon pink in oil paint. And so that was sort of a really fun exercise to figure that out. And then I was like, okay, I can't do it. So I'm gonna see how acrylics work in this one. And so in all of these, hands and arms are very important. I think a portrait, true portrait is not, there's a lot to say with one's hands, and so the face and the hands together, they definitely they tell a story of something. And so I've just having an additional appendage, an arm or a hand, that can go, you can think about that in a lot of different ways. It can, be a little, I guess, dark, mysterious.
Your third eye.
Maybe, all knowing, all reaching. I think a lot of times maybe we wish that we had like an extra hand to help out, to do that one last, be able to do that one thing that we just can't manage with just 2 hands. That's, I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
No question.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about being less planned in your approach than you once were.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just wondering how far you've deviated from your original intent. And if so, like if there's something that's really extremely different from what you had originally planned, then like would there be an example of it?
You mean in terms of, tickle my throat. Like, is there an example of something in here, maybe starting with a particular intent that totally changed?
Yes.
Let me think about that for a second. I think like with these ones, and I have like a couple of paintings that I can think of that are not in this room that like definitely like started with this one. It was more like okay, I knew that. I mean, they're all very similar in that they're a portrait-ish kind of thing. And so it is more about the palette and the way I was choosing to describe the figures color-wise, whether I was going to use more, like what I'm loosely calling like duochrome, monochrome, duochrome, the pink and yellow ones, like that came about. That just, I didn't intend on, I don't think I intended on them to be pink and yellow, and they were going to just be pink. And then I thought about yellow, I was like, kind of like what's happening there, and that energy, and there's also in these two ones, there's a flatness to the figure that I was kind of enjoying and deciding that I'm going to keep it that way and let her kind of emerge out of the flatness of the panel. So, yeah, not, I would say with those, not exactly like I started and just wipe it, because I've done that. I've done that too. Or just take it and hold it. So, so not so much for these ones. Thanks.
What's your favorite color?
Gosh, I think it's changed. For a little while, it was aqua. Aqua was my favorite color. And
Really?
my studio, my whole exterior of the studio is aqua.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's gone through, I don't know, I also like purple. Yeah. It's funny because when people, I don't know, like when people have looked at my paintings in general, and not just these, they're like, you always paint purple. And there's no purple on my palette. But it's mixed, so
Right,
it's
right.
like it's a mixed thing. So and I you know, I'm like, oh, that's so interesting that you see purple. And I was like, no, there is purple. Darkness, but so, but
Everything is purple.
everything is purple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe that. Everything's purple. It's a variation of purple.
I mean, Prince William did too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A question.
Yeah.
Speaking of favorite color, what's your typical palette? Do you kind of have like maybe a mother palette?
I do.
So before you answer that,
Yes, yes.
Jennifer will be here in the spring. We're talking about her coming for a workshop
Spring.
next year.
Oh,
Yeah. So we can answer that question then. Coming to my seminar. Oh, go ahead.
I'd love to know. Oh, that's so great. I've talked about it. So I went from having like a fuller range palette a number of years ago. I worked like that pretty consistently to limiting. Now it's been some years where for a while I was literally working with basically only primaries, so chromatic red, chromatic yellow, chromatic blue, and white, and using a transparent oxide red, like a kind of a burnt sienna kind of red, as an underpainting, so having like really exploring a full range with only those. Now I've since added, you're a painter, obviously, that's why you're asking the question. So let me just, more specifically, more of like a Windsor red, a Windsor yellow, an ultramarine blue, and then adding permanent rose. So I have a pink that I just can't get with just the true red and the white, and sometimes phthalo turquoise. I love being able to mix color with like the minimal.
So phthalo turquoise for flesh cleanings?
No, not well. I say no. More. I mean, you know, I have a lot of blues in skin color. It would be usually that's just a little bit of ultramarine and a wee bit of yellow mix. If phthalo turquoise is so potent. I have to be really cautious about it in skins. So, so many palettes out there. Yeah. What we get used to. Yeah.
Do you have another dog?
Say again?
Do you have another dog?
I have 2 dogs. So Archie passed away in 2019, and in 2020 I got a little puppy who's now 4.5 years old, Nigel. And I have Nancy, who's a smaller one, who is now 2 plus. So I have 2 dogs. None of the dogs in these paintings are mine. They are the dogs of the subjects in the painting. So yes, yeah.
So when you start working these compositions up, how important is it for you to create most of these images at half human scale? Why is that the choice?
Oh,
The decision?
you mean like
Yeah.
these kinds?
Yeah.
So, you know, with these particular one, like I definitely wanted, it was interesting. So I wanted a certain size of person in there, not smaller than what, you know, than what you see, but sort of limiting the canvas size to, I mean, there's, you know, a couple of, there's 3624s and then 3020s and 1830s. And so it was most important to me to have the subject's face, their hands, and some of the upper body, really. Almost like, you know, kind of like what you see when you look in the mirror, more or less. I mean, of course, there's a full-length mirror, but like most of the time, you're about here up, you know, in general. So that's felt like I don't know, like a natural point for just for these particular ones to talk to each other. I didn't want to make them, you know, if I'm going for a particular size canvas and wanting to get enough of a figure in there that I can really describe the flesh and the you know, then everything has to be a certain size. So.
Anybody?
Your thought bubbles really pop and they have this iridescent quality. Are they mostly done then like in an acrylic, or did you limit yourself to those? Or?
Though they're all oil. Like basically the so as far as like the mixing of the different medium on a painting, had to be very careful because you can put oil on top of acrylic, you can't do the reverse. So knowing that I would be like the actual, when I was using, and the spray is acrylic as well. So basically having the sprayed first surface and then working with oil on top of it. But for the faces, for anywhere that I was using the pens, I had to be very careful to keep the oil away from them. The pens are acrylic based. So yeah, the thought bubbles are all in oil as well, like just as are the bodies, the figures.
Well, and like I said, we're talking right now about doing spring workshop.
Figure out when
Yeah, we'll figure that out and let everybody know too. I remember the last time Jennifer was here, there was so much great feedback, not only from the students but the models themselves, that it was just such a joy to work with her. So if and when we get those dates nailed down, make sure that you think about doing that, because you know, you're going to learn from the best. So you are, you're just awesome.